Hey ladies, this is Mocha Mommy here bringing you another video, and some changes are coming to YouTube. I predicted these changes in my video, I Told You So, right around the 9:35 mark. So we're going to be discussing important issues in our space in context of the book Running with Purpose by Jim Weber. This book is written by the CEO of Brooks Running Shoe Company, who is also mentored by Berkshire Hathaway's Warren Buffett. He may be the person who will ascend to the Berkshire Hathaway throne once Warren Buffett retires. He's personally mentored by him, and Warren Buffett wrote the foreword to this book and encouraged Jim Weber to write down his life story, his leadership strategies, his business models, and going through his education and training as an important and powerful CEO from a very small company that does $1 billion in revenue. So I hope that you ladies can extract some of the important life lessons that Jim is trying to teach us. First, that we have to understand that we're not the only ones who suffer from childhood trauma. Jim Weber, in fact, did have his share of childhood trauma. His grandfather died prematurely as a result of health complications due to his alcoholism. That left Jim Weber's father in charge of the struggling family business, and he inherited all the problems that came with that family business, in addition to his grandfather's alcohol problem. So how did Jim Weber cope with this? Basically by avoiding going home and playing hockey. It turns out that soon as the lakes of Minnesota froze over, he was playing hockey from sunup to sundown just to avoid going home and being around his parents and that horrible family dynamic. He also got really good at hockey, so he was recruited to some of the local youth league hockey teams, and he was always the kid who was always having dinner at a friend's house or having a sleepover with some of the other teammates from the hockey team just so he could avoid going home. Because Jim's father was an alcoholic, Jim became a workaholic. He worked for his family's business. In addition to taking on other part-time jobs, he became a stellar student and spent hours in the library just to avoid going home. And he played every sport imaginable. You see, that dysfunction led Jim to look for other people who could help him and give him external validation. It was always a teacher, a coach, a boss that he was always looking for mentorship, approval, and guidance. And that just goes to show you, it does take a village to raise a child, because people are parents and people are imperfect. But because he had some kind of support system around him, he was able to avoid a lot of the pitfalls that come from being a child of an alcoholic. So that's our problem as a community. We don't have that village. It seems as if one dysfunctional home is a reflection of the entire community, as opposed to us really being able to find resources and people who can encourage those who might be having a hard time or difficult road through childhood. So by age 15, it was pretty clear to Jim Weber that he didn't have what it takes to be a professional hockey player. So he then started looking into other career paths. He used his popularity as an athlete to run for student council and to make boys state. He used those connections to be a good student athlete to wrangle some scholarships. And he also used that popularity to find his high school sweetheart, who later ended up becoming his wife. You see, the thing that attracted him to his wife was not just the fact that she was attractive, smart, intelligent, and caring, but also that she came from a functional family. And he really wanted to be a part of a functional family. So they were married very young and are together to this day. Although Jim did make his collegiate hockey team, he played 2 years for the University of Minnesota, he realized that balancing a rigorous hockey schedule could possibly interfere with him getting into a really good MBA program, Master's of Business Administration. So he decided to step back from the sport. In that time, he took on leadership roles, a variety of internships, and also he began his career in banking. He was a young newlywed at the time, and he really did miss being athletic and competitive. So what he did was he took up distance running. That is what interested him in the field of running and outdoor sports that later dictated a lot of his career. Jim Webb had went to the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth, and those connections, even to this day, are still paying dividends. Going to a really good business school really did help him, and all of the connections that he's gained as an athlete has also helped him. Being so into sports was a great way for him to bond with not just the people in leadership, but helped facilitate his own leadership because he was able to relate to a lot of his subordinates. And on a social level, he would often talk about going to the Tuck School of Business and being able to have a beer or two with some of his colleagues. And then those colleagues went on to run Fortune 500 companies. So it just goes to show you that sports can really lead to a great competitive outlet. It's great for your health, but it's also great for you socially to be able to relate to one another, to others. You ladies are going to notice if ever you read a book by a CEO, a politician, someone in the military, or just anyone in power in general, power and leadership in general, you're going to always see the words accountability. Accountability is never about shifting blame, but it is always about taking responsibility. So what Jim Weber realized was that when he came to be the CEO of Brooks, they were on the verge of bankruptcy. So he had to take accountability for the past misbalanced balance sheets that talked about what the company was actually worth. He had to take accountability for the lapses in the supply chain, which caused vendors and distributors to be off kilter and provide poor customer service. He had to take accountability for the staff that was there, even though he didn't hire them, and make sure that he had the right people in the right position and let go of the people who were dead weight. He also had to take accountability for the vision and the future of the company. One thing that Jim Weber also had to do was divest. Number one, divest from poor quality suppliers who were not going to supply the quality materials or also the sustainable materials that he had saw for the future of Brooks Running. He also had to divest from certain employees. He had to strategically lay off certain people and departments and even leadership people, but only once he started getting in a pool of qualified talent. He had to also strategically divest from even retailers. You know, there were some of the discount shoe sporting goods stores who felt that Brooks should just make a $19.99 shoe and should never ever venture into high-end performance gear. Well, what he did was he cleared out his warehouses and gave them a great deal on some of the shoes that he had laying around or in the past that they were no longer going to make. And then guess what? He dropped those retailers. All right. After he cleared his balance sheet of that poor inventory, he then dropped those retailers. And wouldn't you know, right around 2020, a lot of those retailers closed their doors, because he understood that performance running was the future of not just his brand, but really the future of a lot of the high-end brands. And stores that were not going to get involved were just going to get eaten up by the Walmarts and the Amazons. He had that vision. So while a lot of these stores who were critical of him, a lot of these CEOs who were critical of him and his vision and his future for Brooks are the same CEOs now that are no longer employed, that are out of a job because their franchises closed their doors. So it turns out that during that 2020 pandemic, a lot of these retail brick and mortar stores just basically failed, but Brooks ended up succeeding during that time simply because running was a socially distanced activity that people can enjoy safely outdoors. And two, the rise of the smart treadmill and an indoor running boom that had been unprecedented. He took advantage of that, and he made a point to leave people who didn't share his vision and share his passion in the past. Now, of course, you are not going to talk about running a sneaker company without talking about Nike. So many of us may remember this in the early 2000s, the late 90s, early 2000s, when Nike had released its running shoe, the Air Pegasus, that was supposed to be this highly acclaimed and incredible running shoe coming off of the momentum of the Olympics with runners such as Michael Johnson and Gail Devers. Nike was going to be recommitted to runners. And the shoe failed miserably. I think a lot of us ended up in the podiatrist's office. A lot of us ended up in physical therapy, getting injuries as a result of the poor construction of Nike. And as a result, Nike still has never really regained that trust from the market. And really, to be honest, Nike never even really changed their strategy. So Nike now created a new brand called Athleisure, where Nike will do something like customize a shoe for LeBron James, or laser measure a golf club for Tiger Woods, or have a special 3D printer to make batting gloves for Mookie Betts, their celebrity clientele. But for the most of us, we're getting mostly mass manufactured crap. In fact, Nike still to this day employs more fashion designers than they do professionals, whereas Brooks, their business model really does make it a point to emphasize technology and safety. They have a lot of podiatrists, athletic trainers, and even biomechanical engineers that work for the company to make sure that they're providing the best performance enhancing equipment. Another thing that Brooks Running and Jim Weber decided to do was respect women. Basically the rise of equity claims about Title IX, he knew to embrace some of the female athletes and that would be a good way for him to get brand loyalty. He also knows that sports bras are about 15 to 20% of his business. So he definitely needed to make sure that there were women included in the design process and in the marketing process for Brooks. He also brought in a lot of women who were in the sports and fitness community to be sports mentors for the company and also for designers. It was even a woman who helped Jim in his past, who was part of his village, that got him into the Tuck School of Business. So he's always had a lot of respect for the opposite sex, which sometimes we don't always see in this space. So it's important to know that there are respectful men who understand leadership, and they're out there. Jim Weber's book was really great, and he has such great vision for his company. In order to execute that vision, he is actively hiring. So I will put a link in the description box below so that you ladies can check out the webpage. So if you are in Seattle or looking to relocate to the Seattle area, you can just check it out and apply for a job or internship, because he seems to want to really foster a really great and inclusive and futuristic learning environment and employment environment. So definitely check that out. But also, ladies, make it a point to invest in good books, podcasts, and just activities that nurture your soul, that put you in the right place with the right people. We just have to kind of leave all of that negativity back in 2022 as we head forward to 2023, learning to read podcasts by people who are in positions that we respect, people who have accomplished things that we want to accomplish. We want to make sure that we always have a forward trajectory in our lives as we run happy towards our goals. This is Mocha Mommy, and I'll see you in the next video.